Well, today our story time is called Stories in the Sky. We're going to be talking about the Big Dipper and lots and lots and lots of stars up there to talk about, um, as you can see in my background. And we're going to talk about how people told stories about them. So, have you ever done a connect the dots story or a connect the dots picture? Um, I've got one right here that you can see on my table. And what you do is you either connect, you start with the letter or number, and you draw lines and you connect all the dots and it makes a picture. So we're going to do one together that you can see. And as we're doing it, I want you to guess what picture is going to appear when we connect the dots. So this one is a letter picture. So I'm going to have to look for the letter A, and then find B and C and D and see what we can come up with. I can't find A. All right. C, D. Whoops. Okay, just a minute. C. There it is. Here we go. Okay, so let's see if you can guess what this turns out to. All I can see is a bunch of dots and I don't know what it is. So here's A. And then I'm going to B, then I'm going to C, then I gotta find D, and then E, and then F. Does anybody know what that's gonna be yet? And then I gotta find a G, and an H, and an I, and a J, and a K, whoops, and an L, and an M, and an N, and an O. Does anybody know what that's gonna be yet? And a P, and a Q, and an R, and an S, and a T, all in order. Oh, T, then U, V, and then back to W. Oh, let's turn it so that you can see it. It turned out all those dots together turned and formed a W. There, you can see it. So if you've done a dot-to-dot picture before, you know what happens. So here's another bunch of dots, and these have numbers. So I'm going to do these quickly, and I'm going to hold up the dots. Does that look like anything you can identify yet? Not yet, so let's try it. 1, 2, 3. Where's 4? 4, 5, 6, 7. Whoa, I'm off the screen. I don't know what that is yet. 8, 9, 10. Do you know what that is yet? Where's 11? Oh, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. It's a G. Oops, now it's upside down. There it is, it's a G. Okay, so you can do letters and pictures. Now here's a really silly one I found. The connect the dots pictures are just kind of patterns. There's something that, does that almost look like a bear to you? Yeah, this is a crazy one. Let's see what it turns out to be. I don't know what all of this is. It doesn't look like the back half of a bear, actually. Not right away. So let's do 1, 2, where's 3? 3, 4, 5, 6. Where's 7? 7, 8, and 9 is way up here. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. You know what? It really looks silly to me. This looks like a bear face on a box and a tail out back. I connected the dots and I got a silly pattern. I think that's really funny. And we're back. Right. Connecting the dots, it's a simple, fun activity that you can do, and you come up with patterns and pictures and letters, numbers, anything you want to with connect the dots. So you follow the dots and you get the picture. But a long time ago, people used to look in the sky and kind of connect the dots up there too, all of the dots, all of the stars. So if we could put up our slide our first slide for the start of our story. There we go, stories in the sky, the Big Dipper. The picture that you see there is the Big Dipper, but are those lines really there? Nope, we've kind of imagined them. So now I want you to imagine that the sun has set. And on the next slide, we're going to take you to a sky that's starting to get dark. Yeah. Imagine that the sun is set and the sky's getting darker and darker, and you look up and what do you see? Lots and lots of stars. And they twinkle out one by one. And the more time goes on, the darker it gets and the more stars you can see, like little dots. And can you kind of connect the dots and maybe see a picture like we did here on the paper? Well, we haven't done this very much in our world today. Sometimes, in the summertime is different, but a lot of time when it gets dark, we go in our house and we eat dinner and we play maybe, or we go on the computer or watch TV until our parents tell us to go to bed. But a long, long, long time ago, before there was electricity and before there were TVs and before there were cities and towns, and way far back, even as far back when people began, people would look up into the night sky and tell stories. Lots and lots of different stories. They would imagine the lines and the dots between, lines between the dots, and they form patterns and pictures. And now we call them constellations. And they imagine lots of different things, like other people, like gods, like animals. So we're going to see, my favorite thing is animals. And the Big Dipper has lots of animal stories associated with it. So let's see those Big Dippers. Yeah. The pattern of stories today is the Big Dipper. And I like the Big Dipper because it's so easy to spot. If you go out into on a clear night here in Michigan and you look to the north, you're going to see the Big Dipper. Have you seen it? I hope you have. They are pretty bright. What I want to ask is, does it look like a dipper to you? What is a dipper anyway? A dipper was used when people couldn't go to the faucet and turn on the faucet and get a drink of water. Maybe they had to go out to the well and fill a bucket and then dip the water out of a bucket with a ladle or a dipper. So our next picture shows a picture of a dipper. Yep, that's my dipper from my kitchen. But the Big Dipper, we call it the Big Dipper, and it has a lot of dipper stories associated with it. But in other places besides the United States and Michigan, like from Germany, they look into the sky and they connect the dots and they see a wagon. And a lot of people in Great Britain, in England, in Ireland, they see a plow. So I think it's really fun to think about what other people in other lands and countries all around the whole earth see when they look and they see the Big Dipper. Or they imagine different things. That is so cool. So that sort of challenges us to imagine something different when we see a particular pattern. What does that look like to you? So a wagon, a plow, a dipper. Yeah, the next slide. The Big Dipper is a pattern of stars that's part of a larger constellation called Ursa Major. And Ursa means bear, and major means big or great. So take a look at this picture. Can you connect the dots and see what looks to be almost a bear? Yeah, I can imagine a bear. Okay, so let's take a look at the next picture and see, oh, there it is. The same lines that are connected. There's our imagined bear. Yep, there it is. Take a look. There's that bear. Now, in the next picture, we're going to see, can you find the dipper in that picture? We're going to clarify it with the next picture. There it is. Okay, so there's a back. Our bear is back with just the lines, and we circle the dipper, and there it is. The dipper is actually part of the bear's long tail. And Native Americans tell a story about a big bear hunt that goes on all year long. Hunters chase this bear through the sky, and they can never catch up to him. They can never get him until the fall, when they do finally shoot him with an arrow, and his blood spills out all over the trees, the red blood, and it turns all the trees different colors. And then the spirit of that bear goes into another bear, and the hunt starts all over again. So that's a great story. I really like that one. Sometimes it's told as the hunters are birds. It's just depending on what tribe you're from. So now we're going to go and tell a story, a different story, not about a bear, but about a little girl. And she was a very kind little girl, and it's a story from Australia. And there's a storyteller named Jenny Cargill Strong that tells this story and about the girl and how kind she was. And we're going to start with that. You know, since it's from Australia, I think I have to wear my Outback hat, don't you think? Yeah, gotta wear the Outback hat. And behind me is a picture of the skies, the Milky Way over the Outback in Australia. And maybe a little cabin that was a lot like where the little girl lived. So let's start the story. Okay. Long, long ago, there was a little girl that lived with her mother in the outback of Australia in a little cabin at the edge of a village. And the skies were really dark, and every night they could see stars, lots and lots of stars, and even the moon. But a drought came to that part of Australia, and things got so dry. The rivers dried up, the creeks dried up, and a lot of the wells dried up, and everyone was thirsty. The town, the edge of the village, the people there were having trouble finding water. And the mom of the little girl was working so hard to provide food and water for the little girl that she got so worn out. She just went to bed one day, and the little girl was very sad, and she thought, how can I help? How can I help and get some water for my mother? Because this is getting desperate. And then she thought, my grandpa told me a story about a drought when he was a little boy and how he helped to go find water for his family. She says, I'm going to do what my grandpa did. So she decided to go on a journey to look for water. And she was small. So normally maybe you'd take a bucket if you were going to come back with some water for your family. But she was so small, she thought she wouldn't be able to hold on to that bucket. So instead, she brought with her a dipper. But instead of my little plastic soup ladle, she had a dipper that was made out of tin. It looked a little different than this, but it was still basically the same shape. You could dip in and get water. So she took a dipper and she took a walk out into the outback in the morning, but it got hotter and hotter and hotter. And she walked to the edge of the village, and then she got to a hill, and she started walking up the hill. She didn't really know where she was going. She really didn't. She just thought, well, there's got to be some water out there somewhere. And the bush was all scratchy and prickly with weeds. She was getting scratched up, and she was getting hotter and hotter. She got to the top of the hill, and she'd walked for a long time, and she hadn't found anything. But as she walked along, wow, all of a sudden she started to smell water. Things smelled fresher and things smelled different. She walked down the hill a little bit, and she came to a little seep. And a seep is where the water starts dripping out of the side of the hill. And there was water there, and there was a few green plants all around. And she goes, oh, great, I found water. So she took the dipper, and she let the dipper fill with the water from the seep, drop by drop by drop by drop. Took a little while to fill up that dipper, but she filled up the dipper, and then she thought, oh, great, I'm going to take this back to my mom. So she walked back up to the top of the hill, very carefully because she didn't want to spill the water in her dipper. And then she walked back down the hill towards the edge of the village and the house where she lived with her mom. And when she got to the bottom of the hill on the other side, she came to a koala. She saw a koala at the bottom of a tree looking right at her. And she thought, oh my goodness, I've never been this close to a koala before. And she thought, oh, I have some water. He's looking right at me. Mr. Koala, are you thirsty? Would you like some water? Because all the animals in this drought, they were thirsty too, and they were having a hard time finding water. So the little girl walked close to the koala, poured some water in her hand, brought the hand down to the koala, and let the koala lap up some of the water. And the koala was so happy and was so refreshed. We looked at the little girl for a long time and then walked back into the bush. And the girl was really excited because she knew she'd helped the koala. She was very happy about that. And she watched the koala walk back into the bush and wander away. And she was watching the koala and she didn't notice that her dipper had suddenly turned to silver and had refilled itself. All of the water that the koala drank, it all refilled herself. So she kept walking back and back and back on her long journey, trying not to spill the water. And as she got kind of close to town, she came to an old man. And he was by the side of the road where his house was and his garden was. And he was scratching in his garden, trying to scratch some dried up food because he was very thirsty. And his garden was very thirsty. And the little girl said, you look like you need a drink of water. And he says, oh, yes, of course I do. Oh, thank you. And so she offered him some water from his dipper, and he took a nice, big, long drink. And it was so refreshing and so pure and so good. It was the best water. And he says, oh, my little girl. Oh, that was so good. That was the best water I ever had. I'm sorry I can't give you anything in return, but thank you so much. And as the little girl was waving goodbye and walking back into town, she waved goodbye to the old man, and she didn't notice that all of a sudden her dipper had turned to gold and it refilled itself. Kind of magical, isn't it? So she was almost home now. And she got back home and she walked in the door of her cabin and she said, Mom! And Mom had a nice long sleep. She wasn't quite back to normal, but she was a little rested. She was sitting up in bed and she said, oh, you're back. And the little girl says, I brought you some water. So the little girl gave some water to her mom, and the mom just drank that water right down. Left a little bit left for the little girl and said, oh, wow, that was so refreshing. I feel so much better now. That's the best water I've ever had. It's so pure and so good. And I've left you a little bit. And then all of a sudden, the little girl was going to drink the rest of the water in the ladle. All of a sudden she heard a knock on the door. So instead of drinking the water, she went over to the door. And when she opened it, there was an old lady there dressed in rags. And she may have been blind in one eye. And she looked so hot and so dusty that the little girl gave her the last little bit of water that was in the dipper and said, you look like you need a drink of water. And so the old lady said, oh, yes, my dear. And she drank it all up and she said, oh, thank you. That's so refreshing. And as she drank it all up, the dipper, instead of gold, turned to crystals. And so the lady raised it high into the air and said, thank you so much. And she threw it up into the air, and it was now made out of crystals. And the mom and the little girl watched as the dipper went higher into the sky. And when they turned to look for the old woman, she was gone. And later that night, oh, I forgot one thing. When the dipper got raised up high in the air and thrown into the sky, there was one little drip of water that came down and landed on the ground. And where that drip of water landed, a spring formed, and a well and a spring. And there was enough water there for the whole town. And so later that night, the townspeople gathered around the spring, and they all were so thankful that now they had a well that they could share the water, enough for the whole town, enough for everyone, enough for some animals. And when they looked up into the sky, they could see the Dipper up in the sky made out of stars to remind them of the kindness of this little girl and the magic of the one old woman. And that's the story of the Big Dipper that was told by an Australian storyteller named Jenny Cargill Strong. And she always ends her stories by, what kind of stories would you tell? So what kind of stories would you tell about the Big Dipper? Well, I kind of wondered about that. That story, it's set in Australia, and I think it was set in Australia with a drought because recently in Australia, they've had droughts and a lot of trouble. But the original story about the old lady and the Dipper that turned to crystal stars actually came from Eastern Europe. And it got me to thinking, what about Australia? Before Europeans came to Australia long ago, and there were already people living there. They were called the Aborigines. And I was pretty sure that they might have had a Big Dipper story themselves. And I was right. Yes, they do. I'd like to ask you a question. What do you think their Big Dipper story is about? I'm going to give you some choices. Do you think it's about a kangaroo? Australians have lots of kangaroos. Or do you think it's about a koala bear? That's a good possibility. Australia has lots of koalas. Or do you think it's about a shark? Kangaroo, koala, shark? Don't answer yet. We're going to put up some slides and let's take a look. Maybe that'll give you a clue as to what their story would be about. Okay, so there's Australia. And Australia has a little, it's actually quite big. And it's like a little peninsula. And the Torres Islanders live right on some islands where my arrow is pointing. And it looks like there's a lot of ocean around there. Let's see the next slide. Okay. The next slide. There it is. That's a Torres Strait. Here's where I was pointing with the arrow. And here's all of the islands between Australia and Papua New Guinea. And that's where the Torres Island people live. And that's where this story comes from. It's part of Australia. So what do you think your guess was? Islands, kangaroos, koalas? How about shark? Let's see the next one, the next slide. Yeah, their story was about a shark. Yep. So can you see how the Big Dipper might actually look like a shark if you follow the dots, our connect the dots game again? Sort of. That one's a little stretched out. But the people in Northern Australia can't see the Big Dipper the whole year. It rises and sets. Here, the Big Dipper kind of circles our northern hemisphere. It's called a circumpolar constellation. In Australia, it rises and sets because our big fat Earth is in the way. And it rises in February and it sets sometime, I think, in July. And the people from Torres Island, they would watch the sky. And when the Big Dipper or the shark, and they named it Batum the shark, had a name. When those stars rose over the horizon in February, they knew that it was kind of time to do some planting, some of their favorite crops. would do well if they planted it right then, like sugar cane, banana plantain, and potatoes, sweet potatoes mostly. Anyway, and then later in June and July, as the Big Dipper, Batum the shark, would move across the sky, they found that there was a big shark mating season going on, and that was very important for them to stay out of the water. You know, because of the islands, they would always go back and forth between the islands. The winds would change, the seas would be very calm, but it was not a good time to go into the water because it was shark mating season. So that is what Batum the shark meant to the Torres Island people in Northern Australia. They could tell when to plant, when to stay out of the water, all from a constellation of stars. I think that's great. So that is the end of our star stories for today. I'd like you to go outside tonight if you can. It's probably going to be clear sometime. Whenever it's clear, go on out there and check out the Big Dipper stars. Make up a different story about them. Be kind of fun. There it is. Oh, there's our funny guy. But here's a little craft that you can do at home. And I hope that you have brought some of the things that we're going to use today. I brought some marshmallows. I brought some toothpicks. I brought some glue. And I brought some black paper. And I am still, there we go, got rid of it. There we go. Whoops, where's my black paper? Oh, there it is. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to make the constellation shape of the Big Dipper with marshmallows and toothpicks. So there's 7 stars in the Big Dipper, or Batum the shark. And we're going to start with the bowl of the Big Dipper. So what I'm going to do is put a little marshmallow on one end of my toothpick and put another one on the other end. There we go. Now I'm going to start to form the bowl. I'm going to need another toothpick to stick in to do the bowl of the Big Dipper. Can you see that? Whoops, let me see. There we go. And another star over here. This is moving around a lot, so you might have to adjust it. And another star, the toothpicks are the lines in between the stars that we imagine. Ah. Can you see that? It's getting there. It's getting there. Okay, so I need another toothpick in between the bowl of the Big Dipper. So now I have 4 stars. Okay, what do I need? I need a handle, right? Yeah, I do. So I need another imaginary line. And I'm going to go off this direction, and I'm going to start to build the handle of the Big Dipper. Another star. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2 more. Remember how long Ursa Major's tail is? There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1 more. I'm dropping marshmallows on the floor. 5, 6, 7. There we go. I hope you can see this. Oops, sticky. Now the best thing about this is you can eat it. Now as the Big Dipper moves through the sky, throughout the seasons, it changes positions, and sometimes it looks like it's right side up, and sometimes it looks like it's upside down, just like when that dipper dripped out 1 drip of water that was left, or the bear's blood onto the trees. So it moves around. So what you can do if you want to keep your Big Dipper constellation is you can take a little glue and put a dab of glue where a marshmallow was and just glue it down. There. Ta-da. And you can glue the whole thing. Or, you know, it's getting to be almost lunchtime. You can eat it. Oh, that's always good. All right, so there's our Big Dipper. I just ate a star. How about that? So that's the end of our session today, and we hope you had enjoyed it, and we hope you get to go outside and look at the stars. Thanks.
I hope you guys had fun with that story today, and I hope you can come up with some of your own stories if you go out and you look at the stars. Feel free to come up with any that you like, and you can even send them to us if you want to type them up, or you can just tell each other fun stories. So we're going to do another story a week from today. That's Thursday at 11 a.m., where we're going to create a story together. Hope that you join us for that. On Fridays, we're doing First Step Science. So we're going to learn about science and explore the world and do some scientific tools. So I hope you join us for that. And remember, every Tuesday, we are doing Get Crafty. So we're going to create something together and make something. So we hope that you can join us for all of those. They're all available on our website. You can join it live by going to www.greatlakeskids.org/news and events. And if you're interested in donating to the Children's Museum to keep the doors open, or at least keep programs like this on air when the doors are closed, then you can go to that same website, www.greatlakeskids.org/donate, and you can find information on how to donate there. We always appreciate anything that folks are able to donate during this time. So again, join us again for these live sessions, and if you can't join us live, then you can always find these videos later. And until we do another one, we'll say goodbye. Bye.
Bye.